We can begin if you want.
All right, let me do the little announcement. Let's talk about The Graduate. Andrew, do you want to kind of go over kind of the main like plot of The Graduate? Kind of explain.
Yeah, of course. I mean, The Graduate. It's a six. It's a comedy drama movie directed by Mike Nichols. Came out in 1967. Directed by him, but not written by him. It's written by Buck Henry and Calder Willingham. It's based on a novel from 1963, and it's basically the story of a guy named Ben who just graduated college, and he's feeling kind of disillusioned by everything around him once he kind of gets back home to see his like family and stuff. So it just kind of feels, yeah. I mean, he kind of ends up, um, basically the main thing that happens to him in the movie is he kind of ends up, I guess you could say, in a love square. I guess you could say. Uh, so yeah, without like giving anything away,
Yeah.
from it, that's basically the movie.
So we open up on Dustin Hoffman, Ben, in the plane, and they do that kind of thing that they do in the lot in the movie, which I really like, which is they kind of do like that close up, and then they do that full like zoom out,
Yeah, they do that.
and then
Yeah,
we,
they do that several times in the movie.
yeah, 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 and then they cut to the like opening credits scene, which is just Dustin Hoffman standing on like a walking like the moving sidewalk thing. I don't know what those are called.
Like a conveyor belt for
Yeah,
people.
yeah, conveyor belt for people, and then it's the opening credits, which of course is written and sung by the amazing Simon and Garfunkel, with the opening credits being "The Sound of Silence," which
Mhm.
I think it really creates the tone for the film because I think Simon and Garfunkel have a really strange tone for music, especially for like this film, and I think it sets up kind of the different sides of this. Because like on one hand, I think this film is like really dark and morose and sort of existential, but it's also kind of funny.
That's a really funny movie, and I'll talk a little bit more about like my thoughts on the music later on. But yeah, I mean, I like Simon and Garfunkel. I think they're a little underrated as far as like folk acts go.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I like Paul Simon's voice. He's got a great voice. Yeah, just yeah, good. Yeah, very good. Like you said, introduction with the song, with the plane, and everything, like all that stuff, like sets it up pretty well.
And then we get to our first like opening scene, which is the graduation party basically, which is like at his home, his parents' house, who seem to be like I think his dad's like a lawyer or something. Like they're very like well to do. They live in like somewhere
Really?
in like California. And he's and then they have that shot where he is sitting in front of his like fish tank.
Yeah.
Yeah, his aquarium. And then I what I love about that shot, other than just kind of how beautiful it looks, is if you look like to his right or like the left of the screen, you can see the little scuba diver.
Notice that.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a theme that goes throughout the film is the kind of idea of like drowning or kind of being trapped underwater or like because like the scuba diver he's right he's alive and he's underwater but he's also kind of he's out of his element. He doesn't like he doesn't belong there, and that's kind of I think how Dustin Hoffman or Ben feels, especially at the beginning of the film, is he's just trying to, he's graduated from college and everyone's asking him, what are you going to do? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? And it's him just trying to find his way. And I think with that sort of opening scene or like that scene with him in front of the aquarium, I think it kind of shows the type of director Mike Nichols is, which is very and I think this is because he was originally directed plays. There's not a lot of like quick edits in this film. And I think that, of course, partly is because it came out, in the 60s, like the way they edit is very different than they do now. But I think part of it is because he comes from the stage background. There's like a lot of blocking done and not a lot of like cuts.
Well, the cuts are like zooms and zoom in, zoom
Mhm.
outs. Kind of really working. There's like a couple. He kind of switches up the editing a little at a couple parts later in the movie, but that's
Mhm.
later. But yeah, Yeah, but I really like that scene where he's at the party and yeah, his parents are like, all our friends are here to see you, and then like he's like, okay, fine. And he comes downstairs and it's just like a close up on his face and it kind of follows him around as he's like talking to everyone, and it doesn't really let up at all. It just kind of like that part was really, really funny and really good where it just zooms in on him and it's just everyone's faces kind of like mushing against each other and like, oh, what are you gonna do, da, da, da. Just all that stuff. And they never even, I don't think they ever say what college he goes to, except that he
Mhm.
went to an East Coast college
Yeah.
or went to college for. They never say and I think that's probably intentional. I don't think it's important. He just was on the East Coast and now he's back on the West Coast.
Yeah.
But I really like the part. And then, of course, the part where like he goes out to the pool and like some old guy or whatever, he takes him out to the pool and he's like, I got one word for you. He says like plastics or something like that. And Dustin Hoffman's like really good in the movie. He just the entire time he just doesn't like crack a smile. He doesn't say anything. He just kind of is just like, okay, like he has no response. He doesn't really care to listen to these like people.
Yeah.
But he exudes the right amount of, I guess, awkwardness.
Yeah, I think his delivery really helps because like the script at times it almost feels like stilted sort of, but it feels like very like purposeful in that way. And I think Dustin Hoffman does a good job of kind of creating that just constant kind of anxiety or angst, I guess, of a 20, 21, 22-year old or whatever.
Yeah, he's very good. I in doing my Wikipedia research on the movie, like I read through like the casting section. And the casting section is kind of weird because it's like for every like major character in the movie, they had like 20 different options of like actors and actresses, and
Mm-hmm.
basically every like major actor and actress that was working at the time was like considered for all the roles. Like it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And I think the role of Ben, there were a couple actors that were considered, which I thought was kind of funny. It was like, before Hoffman, it was cast Robert Redford, Warren Beatty, and Charles Godrin. Rest in peace. He died like last week or something like
Yeah.
that. Were among the top choices, and all those guys are great. But like I don't know, like Robert Redford as like Benjamin, like it just doesn't seem like it would have been very great. I don't know, like Robert Redford, Warren Beatty, and even like Charles Godrin. They're very like handsome guys. Um, and I mean this in the best way. Dustin Hoffman kind of gives off this kind of like nervous, like kind of like a, and I mean this. I don't mean this derogatory in a derogatory way. Very Jewish kind of
Mm-hmm.
awkward kid
Yeah.
vibe. I believe Dustin Hoffman was 30 when
Yeah.
this movie too, so he's still he looks pretty good for his age, and like you said, he sells being a young college graduate very well. So.
Yeah. And then we go to then he goes upstairs, and that's when you first see his interaction with Mrs. Robinson, which I think is a great introduction to Mrs. Robinson because it immediately shows the sort of power dynamic between the two characters. Because Dustin Hoffman just like he just wants to like not be a part of anything. Like he's just trying to like what he thinks, I guess, is like a good person. And Mrs. Robinson is just very like she's very direct and she's very upfront and she clearly holds all the power. Like when she's sitting on the bed smoking, she just puts out her cigarette or like I don't know, puts ashes of her cigarette right on his bed because she doesn't give a shit. She'll just do whatever whatever she has to do to kind of get what she wants, I guess.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Yeah, you. I guess the weirdness or complexity of the relationship is established right away.
And so they go back to she convinces him to drive her back to the house. And there's like these like multiple times where Dustin Hoffman or Ben keeps trying to like be like, oh, I gotta go now, I gotta go. You can tell like he's kind of not that he like knows what's going on, but he's like suspicious or he just feels very uncomfortable around the whole thing.
I thought he'd come across very naive.
You think so?
Uh, Up to a point. I think it would later, like in their once they're in the house.
Mm-hmm.
I think then he a few minutes later kind of discovers it. But I think like when he's like driving her there, and like walking her up to the house and walking her into the house, like I think he's just a little naive and just kind of like I think he even says like, I'm preoccupied, or he's like depressed or something,
Yeah.
so.
And then of course there's the famous scene where they're in like which I just think is like a beautiful, like just the set, and they're like, I don't, what is that supposed to be, like a bar, living
Yep.
room
Living room.
thing. Um, and that's where he kind of, I guess, like realizes, or or thinks he realizes. And there's that scene where like it's under her like leg, and he says, Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me. And she
Yep.
just like very coolly just like kind of talks it off. And I love how like immediately he just like believes her, which I guess is like, do you think he believes her because like he genuinely like doesn't think that she's trying to seduce him, like it's more naivete, or do you think it's more like he just like is trying to believe her because like he doesn't want to like accept the possibility that she actually is?
He was naive early on, and then
Huh.
I think he gets to a point where he doesn't want to believe it, I guess.
Yeah.
Doesn't I don't think he I think he's just more worried about the consequences at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then of course they yeah, that whole part of the movie is really funny, by the way, where she is pretty much doing whatever she can to seduce Ben, but at the same time saying like, "Oh, I'm not trying to seduce you."
Yeah.
Eventually, it gets to a point where they're like in, what's her daughter's name?
Elaine.
Elaine, right? They're in Elaine's room, and then she like kind of ambushes him, and she's like naked. And this is the part of the movie too where the editing changes, where it almost kind of like the camera almost becomes like Ben's eyes.
Yeah.
So like you see like flashes of her like nudity, like her like her waist and her breasts and stuff like that, and almost as if like, because like Ben, he's trying not to look, and
Right.
he's like looking, here and there. So like that editing was pretty good. It was a good editing choice. But she basically said, Mr. Robinson basically says like, look, like I want to like have sex with you, and that's pretty much it. And then in the middle of her like little spiel, like Mr. Robinson comes home, so runs
Yeah.
down the stairs, and then to the bar, who's played by I forget the guy's name, but Mr. Robinson's played by the guy who plays the mayor in Jaws 1 and 2.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like him. He's pretty good. And he he does the whole thing where like, all right, I got back from college, da, da, da. And it's also kind of established that Mr. Robinson and Ben's dad are like partners. They're business
Mhm.
partners.
Yeah.
And and Mr. Robinson says something along the lines of like, here, let me give you some advice. Like, I think he basically just says like, take it easy, just like chill out. I think
Mhm.
it's basically what
Yeah.
his advice is. Yeah, and then he leaves the house, and I think like too, like that piece of advice probably I think like it's almost like I'd like to think that maybe the piece of advice probably affected Ben in a way where it almost gave him the okay to have the affair, kind of in a way.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also just one last thing about that scene, which I absolutely love, is he asks Ben if the dad asks Ben if he's a Scotch man or a bourbon man, and
Oh
he
yeah,
immediately says, "Oh, I'm a bourbon man," and then his dad just continues to pour Scotch for both of them, and he does that multiple times in the film, where it's just like his dad doesn't really care what Ben thinks. He's just gonna do what, kind of like Mrs. Robinson in his own way. He's kind of just, and actually, I would say how pretty much all the adults are portrayed in this film. They don't really like listen to Ben or Elaine or any of them. They just kind of do what they want, and they try, especially later in the film, to just kind of control them. And they think that like they tell them to take it easy, but at the same time, they're constantly telling them, well, you have to do this or that, which is kind of this strange dichotomy that's going on.
the other part of that scene too, when they're in the house, that I also thought was really funny is that Mrs. Robinson is able to get Ben upstairs because she's like, hey, you want to check out Elaine's portrait? And they go in her room, and it's like a portrait that has
Yeah.
like it's so I think that kind of sets up subtly in a way, because Elaine will come later in the movie. It kind of sets up how much like I guess they love her. Like they kind of basically set up a shrine for her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, well, I guess they love her. I guess sort of in a way. Love maybe more like, I don't know. They kind of, maybe they love her, but it's kind of like more of, I guess, also kind of a control thing as well.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, that's later on, of course. But yeah, but that whole scene, like where they're in the house in Mr. Robinson's house, and they're kind of like they're kind of incrementally kind of moving all the way up to the point where Ben leaves, is very, very good.
Yeah.
It's very masterful.
So then, is the next scene the hotel scene, or is there something in between?
I think more or less, yeah. I think like Ben.
Oh no, there's the the scuba diving scene.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which I was like, that, was that like a dream sequence? That had to have been, right? Because it was just, it's a great scene.
Uh-huh.
And like and I didn't know about like the scuba diver in their tank. And yeah, it's clearly like like a thing on loneliness, or a thing on, yeah, like the metaphor of drowning. Not even drowning, because he's still breathing. So
Right.
like drowning, but you're still alive. You know what I mean? So like you're there's no one else around you. You're lonely, and of course, like in that scene too, his parents like push him down into the pool.
Yeah.
I mean, so it's kind of weird. Like it's a very weird, very like out of place scene, but it just kind of, it's like really good. I don't know. It's kind of, it almost shouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah, it definitely, like with the rest of the film, it definitely is a little strange. I guess I never really thought of it as sort of a dream sequence. I mean, I guess it could be, certainly, because like the way everyone acts around him is sort of surreal. But then I guess you could also say that like the reality of the film has this sort of kind of dreamlike quality to a lot of it. Like there's just a lot of things that kind of feel, especially like how they talk to each other, right? It kind of feels almost like they're acting, right? Like it's almost like a play in that kind of way, where they're constantly like trying to perform these different parts in front of people. But yeah, I think that's it. So it shouldn't work, but that scene is, I really love that, especially how like the parents are trying to they, right, they literally force him underwater and to kind of just like be there by himself alone.
Yeah, it's a really cool scene. It's really good. And then yeah, I think like after the scuba scene, I think that's when he calls her, right?
Yes, at the whatever the name of the hotel, the Taft or something.
Yeah, he's at a hotel. He's at a nice hotel, and I think he pretty much is just like, okay, screw it. He calls her up, and he's like, hey, let's have a drink at the hotel. She's like, okay, I'll be there in an hour. She gets there. Well, before she gets there, uh, you can talk about this scene if you want, but basically his whole like, I don't know, like excursion, like in the hotel lobby, it's very good. It's very,
Yeah,
it's so hard to watch.
because it's like so awkward.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like extremely awkward. Him trying to like talk to people in the hotel and trying to act like he's not doing anything wrong.
yeah, and I think part of the reason this scene works so well, and part of the reason it's like it feels like uncomfortable but also kind of funny, is because like I think if you put like any 20 something year old, right, if you put like me or you or someone in that situation, that's kind of how we would react. Like it's not like how in like, right, so often the movies it's like very like sleek and cool. Like I think Mike Nichols, especially in this film, sort of exposes the sort of I don't know, the kind of facade of these things, especially of kind of these extramarital affairs, and just kind of how absurd it is, and him just kind of fumbling his way and like going up to the front desk, and then him like signing this thing twice because he has to put in a fake name, and his like conversation about the luggage and him only having a toothbrush, and just him like bumbling from one thing to another, I think is it feels real, and because it feels real, it feels awkward and also funny at the same time.
Yeah, it kind of made me think like, like macho kids like in middle school or high school, they like to talk themselves up about being like, as if they like to talk themselves up about, how they would, have an affair with like, their friend's mom or something, some
Yeah.
stupid crap like that. But in actuality, if they were in a situation like that, that's how they would act. That's how 95% of people that age would act in a situation like that. You'd be like very nervous.
Yeah.
It's very funny. He like goes to the front desk. The horrible awkward thing where he goes to the front desk and he's like, oh, are you here for the party? And he's like, yeah. And he goes and to like, he talks to people at the party, and he's like, actually, I'm not in the party. And then he has to go back to the desk.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awful. And he has to like talk about he has to talk to the guy as if like nothing happened or whatever. Well, I actually no, he talks to the people in the party and then he goes to the bar and then Mrs. Robinson arrives and they have an awkward conversation about getting a room.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the front desk again and then he has to ask for a room. So that was really great. And that desk clerk, that guy, do you happen to know who that guy was?
Hmm.
That guy is Buck Henry, which is one of the writers of the movie.
Really?
Yeah, he had died recently. He died in January 2020. He wrote and acted in a bunch of movies and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, but he's really good because he doesn't like care, I guess.
Yeah.
Like he's not really like he's friendly, but he's not over like he's like a polite, but he's not like overly friendly.
Yeah.
It's good.
So then, so then Ben calls Mrs. Robinson from the phone booth, which is also in the hotel.
It's like 10 feet away from the bar. It's like right there.
He calls her, and they go up to the hotel room, and he's still kind of like, just like he was back down there. He's still like really nervous. He's like, well, I don't really know if I want to do this. He's uncomfortable about the whole thing, and she's again kind of like just doing what she wants, and she starts to get undressed, and he's just acting like super kind of like weird and kind of awkward around her. There's that point where she's taking her shoes off, and he just puts his hand, like he's just standing there, and he just puts his hand on her breast.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and then of course the way she ends up convincing him to sleep with her is she basically threatens his masculinity. She suggests that he may be a virgin, and he's so offended by that he has sex with her.
Yeah, and then so they have sex. That's kind of like from there you pretty much have like the affair sequence movie. I think it's cool where it kind of like dips in and out of him chilling at home and then him at the hotel with Mrs. Robinson. And it's pretty much more or less established that he's probably doing this every night for like a couple of weeks or something like that. Right. I think like because they do this thing where like Ben is like lounging in the pool, like at his parents' house, and then he gets up and then he walks into his house, but he's actually like walking into the hotel room. So it's like, yeah, it's just pretty much just kind of like summing up what he's basically been doing for the past several days or so. It's really well done. I was kind of confused at first what was happening, but I realized like, oh, they're just trying to show instead of tell that like this is what he's been doing, and yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely love that montage, especially when they'll cut from like a wide to like a close up, and the assumption, right, is you're in like the same shot, but then it'll like pull out and it'll show that's like in a different place, and they do that like multiple times, and I love that, and I think the music works really well with it too. And I just think that montage is just really well thought out, and also it kind of shows how which I think is also true just for like kids during the which is uniquely like a thing until you like have a real job, which is like the thing of like how like time exists in the summer, kind of like how days are just like kind of all the same. And for him at this time, it seems like time itself is kind of like overlapped on itself. Like there's no real beginning or end. It's all just kind of happening. And
Especially when you're doing basically nothing.
right, because he's just like laying around doing absolutely. And I think there's this sort of like even though like he's having this affair, you can see that he's not really like happy about it. He's just kind of like wandering through life. And you can definitely kind of feel that in the montage. So then after the montage is when the parents try to convince. No, it's the argument between them, right? Between Mrs. Robinson and Ben at the hotel.
I thought, crap. I thought, I'm trying to think of what was first. Was it Dustin Hoffman being yelled at by his parents while he's lounging in the pool, or is it their argument? I don't remember. It's around that area.
Yeah.
Let's just assume that they're arguing in the hotel room first. I don't remember.
I don't know. I just saw it. I think the argument happened first just because yeah, because she tells him not to see Elaine, and then that's what happens. Yeah. So
Yeah. Okay.
so Ben and Elaine's mom Miss Robinson. Ben clearly like he's starting to feel like guilty about them just jumping into bed together and just like he doesn't really know her, and so he's trying to kind of figure out who she is.
Yeah, they have
And
like nothing in common.
they have absolutely, which makes sense because like she's in her 40s and he's like 20 something. And I think this is one of the moments in the film where you get this and I think it's the first moment in the film really where you kind of see who Mrs. Robinson is. I think up to this point Miss Robinson's just kind of
Whatever. Yeah.
yeah, just like a plot point for the film. But there's that really interesting moment where he asks what she wants to talk about and she says art. And he asks like, oh, what kind of art do you want to talk about? And she says, I don't know anything about art. And the conversation kind of continues and they argue. And towards the end of the conversation, we realize that the reason Mrs. Robinson and Mr. Robinson got married is because she got pregnant with Elaine when they were both in college. And at that time, she had been studying art. And you can kind of see at that moment that she feels like she kind of lost her life. Like her life was kind of ruined. And I think like part of the reason she doesn't want Ben to be with Elaine is she wants kind of Elaine to kind of do her own thing. And she feels trapped by him, I think.
Yeah, I think she feels, yeah, it's I think it establishes that Elaine is kind of like the last, like, I don't know, youthful thing about Mrs. Robinson. And so Mrs. Robinson is kind of like, doesn't want it tainted, I guess you could say,
Yeah.
even though Elaine is an adult. Yeah, so yeah, but the whole conversation like sets it up really well. Just kind of like who Mrs. Robinson is and where she's at. And yeah, it establishes that like they're not like in love, you know what I mean? It's not like Ben and Mrs. Robinson are like they love each other. They're
Right.
just kind of like they're just having a good time with the affair. But when it seems like whenever they have a conversation, they fight and they don't have anything in common.
Yeah.
And then I think after that is the pool, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he's lounging in the pool and his dad comes up and he's like, hey, you need to do something. Why you just been lounging in the pool all the time? You need to do something else. And then in the middle of the conversation, his mom comes, and then Mr. and Mrs. Robinson come,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like these black silhouettes because he's like looking up because the sun is right behind them and stuff, which is pretty good. So yeah, that also establishes that like yeah, like Ben once again Ben isn't doing it much, hasn't been doing much since college, and I think that's when he asked him if he's going to graduate school too. It's like, are you going to graduate school? I forget what his response was, but it was just kind of like I wasn't really like planning on it. And I forget what happens after that.
I can't remember. The next thing I remember happening is the date with Elaine, but there was probably something that happened in between.
Yes. So I think like, well, we forgot. Yeah, so yeah, just to reestablish, when they fight in the hotel room, uh, Ms. Robinson's basically like, "Do not go on a date with Elaine."
Yeah.
Even though Ben's parents really want him to go on a date with Elaine.
Mm-hmm.
The only other teenage girl that they know of, I feel, because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, it would be a great, be a great pair, right? And then, yeah, I think like, I don't know if there was any other scene after that, but yeah, yeah, his dad, I don't know. I don't remember what the scene it is. It might have been the scene in the pool, but it might not have been where his dad's like, you got to go on a date with Elaine. Otherwise, I'm going to have the whole Robinsons come over for dinner.
Yeah, they're in the pool. Yeah.
So I think, yeah, he makes that threat. Oh, yeah, they're all hanging out in the pool together. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all hanging out in the pool together. And yeah, for some reason for Ben, he just does not want to have a family dinner with these people because it would just be too weird. So then, yeah, after that, it's Elaine date time, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so he goes to the house and you can see that Mrs. Robinson is absolutely pissed. Of course, Mr. Robinson just like has no idea what's going on. He's just in his own little world. And I think I was really interested by like the television, the like whatever was on TV behind them, because it was pretty loud, right? And it's like it's basically like this 1960s style, like I don't know if it's like a dating show or just like couples come on it and they're like trying to reveal like how well they know each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition to kind of what's going on here, because it's like, and they're like in the television show, they're trying right? They're showing how much they love each other, how much they care for each other. And this one, everyone's just trying to be apart from each other. Because like Miss Robinson, Mr. Robinson are trying to be apart. Ben's trying to like distance himself a bit from Mrs. Robinson, but he's also like trying not to be with Elaine either. And they're all just kind of
At that point,
yeah, they're all just kind of in their own little worlds.
yeah, she's totally mad. And Ben like tries to explain himself. It's like I don't really want to go out with her, but look, he's like, look, I'm just gonna take her out and I'll take her home.
Mhm.
And they, yeah, I wasn't paying attention to TV though. That's interesting. But yeah, they also it's established that like Ben got a new like this hot red car
Yeah,
for graduation. And yeah, he takes Elaine, who we just met. We have not heard Elaine at all, but
yeah,
like going on a date. We basically know nothing about her. They get in the car and like, Ben is pretty much just trying to like make himself undesirable. So he's driving really fast in his car. He's swerving around, going really fast. She's trying to like talk to him, but he's giving him like one word answers. He's trying to be a really bad conversationalist. And he takes her to a strip club pretty
yeah.
much. And they sit, front row, and she's like totally just like she like can't believe it. And the woman, the woman who's stripping, she has like the tassel things on her breast.
Yeah,
Does the thing where she kind of she spins them around or whatever. And then like and like I said, he's just trying to get Elaine not to like him,
hmm
so she'll go away. But I don't know why the stripper did this, but she like gets like close to her head or something. And Ben's like, "Hey, stop!" Like he tells the stripper to stop. And I think after that, like for some reason, he just kind of feels bad now,
yeah,
which is exactly, yeah. Like honestly, like I said, like 90% of the people who would have this plan would immediately feel bad after like 10 minutes.
yeah.
If you're like, yeah, I'm gonna make her not like me, but people like can't help. I think most people don't like not being liked.
hmm
So I think that was realistic. How just like he just cannot go all the way with it. And yeah, and then he's like, "Look, I'm sorry. Here, let's go to a drive-in." And they go to a drive-in, and then from there, more or less, it's established that they kind of make some kind of connection.
So they're kind of like hitting it off, and they drive back to her house or her parents' house or whatever. And then she asks him up for coffee, and he's like, which obviously is like a nod to like, hey, let's go, do a little hanky panky. He's like, oh, let's go find a bar. And she of course suggests the Taft Hotel or whatever hotel it is. And he like swerves
Wait,
off the road.
did she suggested it?
Yes. Yeah. Because he wants to go somewhere. He's like, let's go to another bar. And she's like, that's the only bar that's open. So they end up going there. And there's that kind of weird thing because he's been going there for like weeks or months, or however long. And like everyone are saying, oh, hello, I'm Mr. Gladstone, which is like his pseudonym.
Hey, yeah. Like he gives him a big name. And yeah, he's been there so much that everyone's like, hey, welcome back, Which if I was Ben though, like I would just make up an excuse at that point. Like I don't know why he wouldn't have just been like, yeah, maybe not there. Maybe we could try some place to go to, Like I don't understand why he did that. But yeah, he goes in there and everyone's like, hey, what's up? And he's like, okay, let's leave.
Yeah.
And they get in the car and they're about to leave. And I think Elaine just asks him like, are you having an affair?
Mm-hmm.
And I think he says yes, right?
Yes.
I think he is honest, but he doesn't say who yet.
Yes. He says, I'm having an affair with a woman who's married and they have a son.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I guess like it's kind of true. I mean, it's close-ish. But yeah, I think part of the reason he goes to the Taft is because like when she suggests, like I think like at this point he's a little paranoid. So I think in like his mind, if he doesn't go to the Taft Hotel, that's like somehow more like mysterious than if he does. But then obviously like the plan goes immediately wrong, and when he gets there, and then she asks him, and he confesses, and then they go back to the house, and she drops him off, and they make plans for the next day to like go on a drive basically, and then they come back the next day, and it's pouring down rain, and Mrs. Robinson jumps into the car, and she basically tells him to drive around the block.
And yeah, she's very mad because she knows that they're gonna go on a second date.
Mm-hmm.
She's very angry, and she's like, "Look, you will not date Elaine, and if you want to see her again, well, I'm gonna tell her that you and I have been having an affair." And so Ben, which kudos to him, he's like, "Well, I'm gonna tell her first." So he
Yeah.
runs out of the car and he just runs in the house and he like goes up to Elaine's room and Elaine's like, "Oh, I'm not dressed." And he's like, "I gotta force myself in and tell you this." And like, yeah, he's like, "Look, that that old woman that I said I was having an affair with. Well," and then like right behind her is his mom, and
Yeah.
she kind of pieces it together, and she's very upset. She's very very mad, and they do that amazing zoom out. Maybe my favorite zoom
Yes.
out, where like yeah, like Ms. Robinson's in the corner, and she looks very upset and very old too.
Mm-hmm.
They zoom out and it kind of zooms out far enough where it's like the camera's almost behind Ben's shoulder.
Yeah.
So it's like it's up close to Mrs. Robinson and it zooms out to show you how far away Mrs. Robinson and Ben are, which is very good. It was very, very yeah, the whole movie, the look of the movie, and I would generally say like the editing and the sequencing of the movie is very masterful, very purposeful. Everything is very, there's not really any wasted I don't know, techniques. It's all very purposeful, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah. I think that moment's really it's just a really powerful moment. And I think they like very well kind of walk the line between like explaining what's happening and showing what's happening. Like it never feels like you kind of always know what's happening, but they never have to like explain it. I think they Mike Nichols and his whole team did a really good job of kind of using film grammar to their kind of advantage to tell what needed to be said.
Yep, very, very good. I think the guy who shot the movie, so like the cinematographer or
Mhm.
whatever, I think he said like once again, this was in the Wikipedia page. The guy who filmed it, yeah, it was a guy named Robert Surtees who did the photography. Um, and it says here he's done like major films since the 1920s, including Ben-Hur, the big
Wow.
giant
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
And he said later, it took everything I had learned over 30 years to be able to do the job. I knew that Mike Nichols was a young director who went in for a lot of camera. We did more things in this picture than I ever did in one film. So I think that kind of like the guy who like filmed Ben-Hur is like, yeah, like it was a very involved process in terms of at least like the cinematography, the
Yeah.
camera film work. So
Yeah.
it says a lot.
Absolutely beautiful visually.
Really good.
So after this scene, she's basically fed up with him and she ends up going back to Berkeley, right?
Yes, I think the summer's over.
Yeah.
So I think the summer's over. He is not seeing either one of them. And yeah, she goes back to school in Berkeley. I don't think she's done with school. I don't know if she's going to graduate school or
Yeah.
she's still an underclassman, but she's studying at Berkeley. For what? I don't know. But yeah.
And then is that the scene between Ben and his parents where he says he's going up to Berkeley?
Right. It's right before that. So yeah, Ben goes to his parents. Great scene, really funny. Goes to his parents and he's like, "Guys, I'm marrying Elaine." And his parents are like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it. When's the wedding?" "I don't know. Where did you propose to her?" "I haven't told her yet." "Does she know about this at all?" "She actually hates me." Like it's just a really, really, really funny conversation. And then he leaves. He
Yep.
uh he pretty much leaves and he basically moves to Berkeley, it
Yeah.
seems. It seems like he gets like a shitty apartment.
Or like a dorm or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, I will say at this point forward, pretty much when he has his conversation with his parents and then on, I think the movie does for me kind of take a quality dip a little bit.
Hmm.
The rest of the movie is still good, but I don't find it as interesting or as engaging or as thoughtful and funny as the first half of the movie, where you build up all the way up to when they, discover like Tulane discovering that Ben is having an affair with her mom.
Yeah.
I think the rest of the movie is good. I just wasn't as impressed with it, but it was good.
Yeah, I will definitely say it kind of takes a turn for the rest of the film. One of the things I do like, and this has to do with kind of the travel up there or whenever they shoot in the car, is have like a lot of like just really incredible angles. Like it didn't look like they used any sort of like rear projection or anything like that. And so like they have like
Yeah.
some like absolutely beautiful shots of like at the back of the car, which had to be on like some sort of mount, or they'll do like ones from the side. There's just like some really,
Yeah, they're really
um,
driving the car.
yeah. So basically, he goes to Berkeley, and he basically stalks her, right?
That's the point of going to Berkeley, is
Yeah.
that like he basically just wants to confess his love for her, so he decides to move there.
And so then he stalks her for a while. He ends up getting on a bus with her, and she's going to the zoo to meet
The boy,
boyfriends, something like that. And he basically follows her to the zoo and kind of like inserts himself. And then Elaine and the boyfriend kind of go off. And that's pretty much the end of it. Although I do think there's some like interesting stuff that kind of like meeting at the monkey house, kind of showing how like how primal his sort of needs are. Like it doesn't feel like he's like his love for her doesn't really feel like love as much as it does just kind of this like need. Even I mean,
is
kind of like yours.
it's just like a very, very like it's just like very desperate. He's very desperate.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost
It,
like he just needs to be liked, right? Like he just needs to be loved more
I
than.
think, yeah, he's desperate for her love. He's desperate to be loved, and I think like also he's like the strongest feeling he's probably had in a long time too. So he's probably chasing that feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he comes across as very desperate, and a little weird. He comes across as very, yeah, very sad and desperate, and
So then one night he's in bed, or no, he's shaving. Maybe it's morning. I don't know. Sometime during the day he's shaving, and Elaine comes to his like dorm room, bedroom, whatever, like his apartment. Um, and she tells him that she thinks that basically Mrs. Robinson told Elaine that Ben had raped her, which is interesting. And Ben like tries to like explain himself. He's like, no. Like she tried to seduce me, and they're kind of, they kind of have like a back and forth. And then she basically does like she just screams and sort of,
she screams like really loud.
yeah. And that's when like the landowner or like super or whatever comes up and demands him, because he won't have any agitators in the house, and basically demands that he leaves. And then it seems like at the at the end of that scene, him and Elaine are kind of like on good terms. Like Elaine kind of has, I don't know if like she necessarily like because she like believes him, or for whatever reason she's kind of like,
For some reason, she really likes him a lot.
yeah. And at that point, that's when he proposes to her, right?
Yeah. Well, no. She leaves and then she comes
Uh-huh.
back.
Yes, right.
She leaves and comes back, and then yeah, he while he's yawning, he proposes to her, and then but then she also says that like, oh, my boy, the other guy, the guy she met at the zoo, also said he wants to marry me, and then yeah, Ben gets kind of jealous and like follows her around school,
Mhm.
which I will say like Ben comes off as a creep in the second half of the movie. Like he comes off as like a weird, smarmy like creep. Like no one would he doesn't like come across to me as like a relatable hero as much as he did.
No, absolutely
He comes
not.
across as like a weird creep who's like, I don't know, like super jealous and super desperate, and it's funny, and it's not like necessarily a bad thing. I think I didn't read the full interview, but I saw on Wikipedia, like, Roger Ebert, when the movie came out, he liked it.
Mhm.
But I think like maybe like several years later, I think that's what he said. He's like, it wasn't as good as like last saw it, because I think that I feel more sorry for Mrs. Robinson than Ben. I think is what he said.
Yeah.
Uh, which I see what he means, but I guess that's what makes it a really good movie, in that you can kind of look. It's a really good movie because in that way, then, because I think a really good movie, you can look at it at different angles and
Mhm.
kind of see something different with it. You can look at Ben in the second half as kind of like a sad sap who is, just passionate for Elaine and loves her, or you could look at him as like a weirdo creep who really doesn't know what he wants, and he's young and he's like kind of like desperate. So I think you could look at it either way, and I think that's kind of the sign of like something working.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next scene then is back at the apartment, is the confrontation between Mr. Robinson and Ben.
Mr. Robinson found out. He figured it out. He's mad.
And I love that scene because it's like it's exactly kind of like the kind of scene I feel like you would have with like just like an old man. Like he like wants to like simultaneously be respected, but simultaneously he also feels like Ben should be angry. Like he's like he's like angry on both sides, right? Because he's angry that he didn't have like a real love affair with Mr. Robinson. Like there wasn't like love there. But then he's also angry that the affair happened at all. So he's just like angry for all of the reasons.
Yeah, he's pretty pissed off. But it's funny because like I don't know, Mr. Robinson, like outside of like killing Ben, there's not a lot he can do.
Yeah.
So he like threatens to like sue him
Uh-huh.
to like keep him from like seeing Elaine, which doesn't make any sense. Like Elaine, like I'm assuming is an adult,
Right.
so I don't see. That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
And like he's like, yeah, no, they're getting married. Elaine's getting, and he goes away, and then Ben's like runs out the door. And pretty much from this point forward, like Ben is basically just like racing around all over California. Pretty much
Yeah.
is what I've got. I think I forget where he goes to his apartment. I think he goes to.
I think he goes back to Elaine's house.
Yes, he goes in. Yeah, because he talks to Mrs. Robinson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's when. So he goes back to Elaine's house, either to find Elaine or for whatever reason. Yeah, and that's when he realizes that Elaine is going to marry whatever.
I forgot about she goes to her dorm room. I forgot about that.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yes, that's right. He goes to her dorm room, and that's where she had written him a letter that basically saying like it's not going to work out.
Yeah, her roommate brings a letter down to him, which I believe the roommate is played by Elaine May.
Really?
Yes, Elaine May.
That's interesting. I think again that's just like one of those scenes where I think they do some really interesting things with sound, which is like, and also long shots. Like a lot of these shots are just like super long, and like the shots just like right I mean it's like probably like a 30-second shot of just like this woman walking down the hall, but then like over it is laid like him or her, I guess, like reading the letter, like right thinking like he's kind of reading the letter. I think that's just kind of like a really interesting moment in the film.
Yeah, it's really good, and yeah, and then I think he goes to Elaine's house. He goes to Elaine's house, and he has a falling out with Mrs. Robinson. She calls the cops. He's able to evade the cops very well, by the way. They arrive.
Yeah.
But he still gets away in his car. It's kind of weird, but okay. She's like talking on the cops. He's like, is he armed? Let me ask him. Are you armed? That was good. But Ms. Robinson basically says like, yeah, they're getting married. There's nothing you can do. Okay, great. And he drives away again. I think where does he go next?
He goes back to Berkeley, where he like goes to like these group of like men in like a locker room or whatever.
It looks like a fraternity house.
Yeah, like a fraternity house or something. And he basically like pretends to be the friend of whatever the guy's name is. And they're all kind of like joking around. They're like, oh yeah, I wish, I can't wait to get a piece of that. Or, they're very like great sexual fraternity kind of things. And you can see that Ben's like pretty like perturbed by this. Like he's kind of bothered by this. I don't know. I don't think it's really chivalry as much as it is just his basic jealousy. But he like figures out he only figures out that it's in Santa Barbara. So he races towards Santa Barbara, and he's driving his car, and he stops at this gas station, and then he calls up the father of the man, who's like Dr. Whatever, and he's like, oh yeah, I'm Reverend blah blah blah, his brother, which of course, and he's like, do you know where he is? And he's like, no, but it's probably at like this church. And so then on like whatever street. So he asks like the gas station clerk like where it is, and it's just kind of this like Ben's like trying to move really fast, and this gas station clerk's just like super like just relaxed and chill and slow. And he's like, oh yeah, it's like 6 blocks this way and 3 blocks that way. And Ben jumps back into his car and starts racing off. And as he's racing off, the gas station clerk asks, hey, do you need any gas? And he just races away.
Yeah. And he runs out of gas.
And he runs out of gas. So then like the final like 3 blocks is him just like running. And it's such an agonizingly like slow run.
He just runs like a normal guy.
Yeah, what's interesting about the scene is whenever I remember the scene, I always remember the song Mrs. Robinson being played under it. But when he's running, there's no sound at all except like the cars going, which is just like all the more agonizing. And there's that shot on the telephoto lens where it's just like him running towards the camera,
Mhm.
and it's just like so agonizingly long. Because
Well, yeah.
yeah, because like the telephoto lens, right, it like flattens the whole like camera, so it doesn't look like he's moving at all, and it's just like it just feels like you can like the tension is almost like in how like slow it feels.
Which one thing I forgot to mention now that you mentioned the music was that the music, but I think during the montage where he's going around California visibly stalking her,
Mhm.
they play Scarborough Fair like 3 times.
Yeah.
They didn't need to play Scarborough. So the use of music, I love the music, and the music is used well in certain places, but sometimes there's where it just wasn't well. Like I feel like it could have been. I feel like they could have just kept some scenes silent, like when he's running, it would have been better. You know what I mean? Like there's a couple there, like especially like maybe like 1 or 2 times when they use Scarborough Fair, like for like the 10th time,
Yeah.
it would have been just fine. If there was no music playing, especially when he's in the monkey house and he's looking at the monkeys.
Yeah.
Why you would play the song during that time? I mean, were they not able to get like audio of like the zoo or something like that? Like it's a zoo, so I mean, like there are people and they're animals, so
I
I would
think
have been.
actually, I think there was another song because there's a song if you listen to like the Simon Garfunkel album, The Graduate. There's a song like about the zoo, which is kind of like this kind of lighthearted. Do you know what song I'm talking about?
No, no, I haven't listened to the Graduate album. I've listened to maybe like 1 or 2 Simon and Garfunkel albums, but
Okay.
not that one. And it's been a little while since I've listened to them.
It's like it's like this kind of like upbeat, kind of silly song. So I think like originally that was written for that scene and it just didn't work. So they ended up using Scarborough Fair again.
They just might have. They just. It's so stupid. I mean, I don't know. I just wasn't. I wasn't a fan of that decision. I just wish it would have been kept silent. Like no music, no song at
Yeah.
that point. Scarborough Fair is a great song, but I don't need to hear it like 3 times in a row is just a little much.
It was a lot. Yeah, I agree. And I think also part of it is just that like Simon and Garfunkel by this point is a pretty like big group, and I think it was kind of a big deal. So there was probably I imagine that some push from producers and probably higher ups to kind of make sure because there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of music in this film, like a lot.
I had read that Mike Nichols, they did the thing where Mike, while they were editing the movie, put Simon and Garfunkel songs in it,
Hmm.
but he, like as like a placeholder music for
Yeah.
when they put the real music. But I think Nichols liked it enough that he just kind of decided to that be part of the movie, the Simon and Garfunkel tracks. So yeah, and like I said, the beginning works well, and on yeah, like throughout, really good. It's just yeah, like I said, it's just there's some repetition.
So then he gets to the chapel, and
Yeah.
there's of course probably one of the most, if not the most famous scene in The Graduate, where he runs up the stairs and there's like a I don't know if it's like glass or whatever,
Yeah.
and Elaine and her fiance like basically like they just kissed, they're hypothetically married, and Ben slams on the glass, um just yelling her name, and we cut down to Elaine, and there's this, and she's almost like mesmerized, almost as like she's walking towards him, like her face is almost kind of blank, almost like you can't really like.
Yeah, she's like kind of I think she's like extremely flattered
Mhm.
Ben would do something like that, I guess.
Yeah. And then there's one of my favorite moments in the film, which is they cut to like these again kind of how like claustrophobic this film is. They'll cut to like other people's faces, but this time it's like completely silent. So like you'll and it's like the silence is kind of eerie. And it'll be like people angry, like there's Mrs. Robinson and Mr. Robinson, and they're like yelling at the or like near the camera, and it's just like close-ups of them, but you don't like hear anything.
They're like yelling at her. They're telling her what to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's interesting that it's kind of silent because I think this is the first moment where she kind of does something that isn't because of her parents, right? This like the moment where she's kind of like first able to not listen to them. So Ben runs down the stairs. He like passes um, Mr. Robinson.
He
Him,
like get into like a fight that was really real. It
yeah,
was
yeah, yeah. That was actually a really like well choreographed fight, like for as like silly as it is.
it was funny. It was good. And then yeah, yeah, Elaine, like you said, she's like, yeah, let's go. And he like gets the
The
cross.
cross.
He gets the cross and he waves it around, which is funny because Dustin Hoffman is Jewish, and he's like waving it around. He's like get back, and yeah, just the whole sequence of everybody like yelling and stuff is really funny. And they go out there and he puts the cross like through the door so that people can't like leave the church. And yeah, and then they wave like a Santa Barbara bus down, and they get there and they sit in the back, and the whole ending is really good. But yeah, the ending scene where they're sitting in the back of the bus, they kind of are happy that they're together, but I feel like when you look at their faces, there's almost another like, all right, we're together, now what?
Yeah,
I guess what we're gonna do. They're just like yeah, there's like there's a release, but there's very little. There's a release, I guess, now that they're together, because I think they do like each other, but there's still apprehension. Yeah, I drive away, and then I think that's the end
that's in.
of the movie.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how long they kind of they hold on
Yeah,
their two faces, right? Because it's like at the beginning, because like, and I think part of this is playing with the form of kind of like, because so often when you see these, especially like in the 40s and 50s with all these like musicals and stuff, the love interests run off and like happily ever after. But by like holding on that scene, and you can kind of see them start to kind of recognize that maybe this wasn't the greatest idea, and they're kind of acting on emotions, or even more like just like kind of momentary, and they recognize that, well, now like we have the rest of our lives to live, and that's not right. They didn't really like, they thought like, especially because like the whole idea of love in this film is kind of strange. Like there's not a lot of relationships that are really kind of based on any sort of love, especially this one, right? So
maybe Ben's parents, they seem to like each
yeah,
other.
that's true. I guess there's
Maybe,
them.
but Ben's parents like bother him. They like kind of
Right.
bother him a lot. I think it's funny though. Yeah, like you said, they kind of act on their instincts and on their emotions. So I think it's funny that early on, like Ben is completely like just does not want anything to do with Mrs. Robinson, but then he kind of lets his instincts go and kind of like goes by emotion to
Yeah.
like do what is like, I guess, like most pleasurable, I guess you could say. And but because he did that, it made his life more complicated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, and especially Mr. Robinson is like, hey, relax, chill out. You know what I mean? And he takes the advice, but it completely is like it's the worst advice. Because it kind
Yeah.
of makes everything more complicated for him. And
So out of 10, what would you rate this film, Andrew?
I kind of go back and forth between like an 8 and a 9,
Mhm.
but I think I would ultimately give it a 9, just because like I think the whole movie itself is like very good. I'm just not like I just don't think that the second half is as good as the first half. I think the first half is like masterful in the way that it's shot, and the way that it's edited. And I think that when when Dustin Hoffman is acting like an awkward 20-year-old, it's very very funny. It's very great. It's very good. It's very well done. And I think just the awkwardness of him having to conduct the affair is amazing, and just and all that stuff. And then yeah, it becomes like this really weird, complicated thing where the love square with Mr. and Mrs. Robinson and Ben and Elaine. But I just think that like when he leaves and goes to Berkeley, the movie just isn't as interesting to me. It doesn't feel as unique or as funny, because Ben isn't as awkward. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
which I think kind of dulls the humor, but it's still really good. And the ending is really good, where he like bursts into the church and they have a fight, and that's like amazing too. But yeah, just like it captures what it needs. The feelings that it's trying to captures, it captures well. And the use of music, I have questionable things about the use of music, but the music is really good. And yeah, it's just a very purposeful, all around good comedy drama. It's also one of those movies too that just like kind of it's just a very quintessentially 60s movie. So it's kind of fun to like watch, like like kind of all the 60s kind of
Yeah.
things going on in very subtle ways. So yeah, really good. I'll give it a 9. Did you? This is a movie that you've seen probably like a couple times before. Did you like it more on this rewatch? Did you like it less? About the same?
So for a long time, this movie has been a 10 out of 10 for me. But I think part of the reason I love the movie so much when I first watched it, and the first few times I watched it, is I think I was in a very specific place in my life, and I could connect in a very real way with that kind of side anxiety and angst. Having not watched it in 4 years and kind of coming back to it at a very different place in my life than I was then, I still love it. I think it's a 9 out of 10, but it doesn't like, for me, like a 10 out of 10 film has to be like, it has to like fundamentally like change how I feel about something or like how I see things. I don't know if it does that for me anymore. I still think it's a very masterful film. It's absolutely beautiful. I think it's one of Mike Nichols' best films. I love the music. I love everything about it, but I just don't, yeah, especially like the last, 30 minutes of film in Berkeley, I connected with it a lot less than I used to, but still, overall, a really just enjoyable film.
Yeah, no, I'm glad I watched it. I do wish I would have watched it way, like at least like a couple. I wish I would have watched it when I was like a teenager or something like
Mhm.
that. It's cool. It's still like really good, and I would definitely watch it again for sure because it's very, it's a satisfying movie. It's just satisfying in a way because it's just like funny in a very like kind of awkward, dry way, and then the way that the movie develops is satisfying in that way because it has a very purposeful flow and just really good. But yeah, really solid. Yeah, there's a reason why it's a classic, I guess.